President's inbox in 2013 will be extraordinarily full. The agenda is almost staggering in its scope and complexity. The domestic policy agenda alone is massive. The President has to promote a stronger economic recovery. He needs to reduce unemployment. He needs to strengthen manufacturing. He needs to tackle the federal budget deficit and the tsunami of spending on healthcare. Focusing on the domestic policy agenda alone could be a full-time job for the President, but the President never has the luxury of ignoring international issues. The foreign policy inbox, I think, will contain three main categories of problems. First, there are immediate issues that will definitely be problems in 2013, and they'll require action. My top five list starts with Iran and its nuclear program, and that issue will probably come to a head in the first half of 2013. Then there's Afghanistan, which will continue to be a challenge next year. There's the Arab Spring, continued turmoil in Syria, certainly. Egypt, Libya, and Yemen in particular will be priorities. Then there's Europe and the continuing financial crisis there, the economic recession. The United States has limited leverage over Europe, but it's an issue that's tremendously important. And then there's working with China and the other members of the G20 on trade and global economic issues. So those are immediate challenges that the President will definitely have to deal with. But there's a second category of issues. He needs to be prepared for surprises. These could be good surprises, like peaceful democratic revolutions, but it's probably better to keep an eye out for bad surprises. And my top five list starts with Pakistan. Difficult and weak government. It faces domestic radicals and insurgents. It has troubles with its neighbors, and it has nuclear weapons. Pakistan could surprise us in many different ways, and all of those surprises could be bad. Then there's North Korea, which is always volatile, but especially during a time of leadership transition, could be provocative. Also in Asia, there's a series of island disputes that have really heated up in the last few years, and especially between China and Japan, tensions there are very high, and confrontation can't be ruled out. Then there's Russia. With Vladimir Putin fully back in power, there's a possibility that he could become more belligerent toward its neighbors. And then turning to Europe, a real surprise, but a real crisis could be the collapse of the euro. I think that's unlikely, but if it happens, it would be catastrophic for Europe, for the United States, and the global economy. Then there's a third set of issues, and that is that the President has to stay focused on long-term priorities. That's always difficult because these immediate crises always tend to push long-term issues to the side. But the President needs to stay focused on long-term strategic challenges. My top five list starts with the rise of China and the management of U.S.-China relations. That will be one of the keys to global stability in the first half of the 21st century. There's a continued need for nuclear arms control and disarmament, a huge priority for decades to come. Promoting progress in the Islamic world and strengthening relations with the Islamic world will be a generational project. Another long-term priority is generating more opportunities for women and girls around the world. And then we need to effectively address the challenge of climate change. These are all big long-term issues that could get pushed to the side, but the President really can't push them to the side for very long. Finally, the United States and the President in particular need to stay focused on steps that need to be taken to sustain the United States as a global power in the 21st century. Many of the fundamentals are strong. America's demographic trends are actually pretty good. The United States has been an economic powerhouse for over 100 years. America's military power and soft power are unmatched. But at the same time, there's no doubt that the United States faces problems, and this is where we come full circle, and this is where domestic policy issues and foreign policy issues come together. The President and Congress have to work together to tackle domestic policy problems, some of the problems I mentioned and others, and they need to make larger investments in some of the key components of national power, infrastructure, innovation, and education in particular. America's problems are basically policy problems, which means they're relatively easy to solve if the President and Congress can work together and keep their eye on the ball. If they can do that, there are very good reasons for being optimistic about the future of the United States as a great global power in the 21st century. That would be good for America, and I would argue that would be good for the world as well.